guys, Trucking History channel here. What if the trucking industry was never deregulated? Have you ever thought about that? I mean, I know it's been years and every scenario off the planet has been discussed through the years, but what if trucks were never deregulated? What would have happened? Well, first of all, let's go back in time and see what may have occurred before deregulation. Now, as you know, deregulation was supposed to inspire competition, and the government got the idea because of deregulating the airline industry. Well, that was a fiasco. What happened with airlines is that the smaller markets lost routes. Airlines pulled out of the smaller markets and went to only those that could generate more money. A lot of smaller airlines formed, grew, took market share, and then all of a sudden went bye-bye. There are dozens of them that happened. But the smaller markets lost airlines. New competitors came in. Fares did go down. It really did. I mean, the traveling public benefited. But I read something interesting about the airline deregulation that may relate to trucks. I didn't fly too much before deregulation, so I don't know if airplanes were as full as they are now. You take a plane now and there's no empty seats. I don't know how it was before deregulation. So, that could have happened. But let's talk about trucking deregulation and what led up to that. You had a period of time during the 70s when manufacturing companies with dozens of plants all over the country consolidated into bigger plants where they could have fewer locations and hire more people at one place and ship all over the country. See, in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, and even into the 60s, a lot of these large manufacturing plants had little smaller plants all over the country, and those plants would make the products and ship it regionally. You wouldn't have a plant in New York that back in the 40s that would ship stuff to California. They would have a lot of plants stretched all over the country, and they would only ship regionally to the states around that plant. So in the 70s, companies started consolidating plants into mega plants, and because of this, they didn't need LTL freight anymore. They wanted truckload freight because they would be sending out a truckload of freight all over the country and not just a few boxes here and there to cities close by. So the need for truckload freight increased in the 70s. And that's where you had trucking companies supplying to the ICC that were only truckload carriers. And a lot of them were contract carriers, which meant they would only haul for certain companies. They would adapt their routes or their operations in the trucking part of it to that of the person they were carrying freight for. LTL carriers were not meant, they weren't designed for truckload freight. But what if? Now here we go, we're playing armchair quarterback now. What if deregulation never happened? All these new upstarts of truckload carriers never occurred. How would the less than truckload carriers that we all know and love from back then, how would they have adapted to carrying truckload freight? I mean, it would have been real easy. All you have to do is establish a division, use owner-operators carrying your trailers, and they carry a truckload of freight. Most all of the motor carriers in the 60s, 70s, they had special commodities divisions. Now, granted, a lot of them were carrying flatbed stuff, steel, lumber, stuff like that. They weren't carrying truckloads of van freight. So it wouldn't have been too difficult to do that. I mean, you already had a special commodities division using owner-operators. Just buy a few more vans and get a contract. Now there's the problem right there. I just solved my own problem. When you have a common carrier, you weren't a contract carrier. You would have had to go to the ICC and say, we want to start up a contract carrier to handle nothing but truckload freight. The ICC probably would have said no, because throughout history, some companies did actually have 2 applications before the ICC. This was in the early days. They had 2 because they weren't sure if they were going to be a contract carrier or a carrier of general commodities. Now, I can think of a couple of companies that did that, but I'm going to use my favorite example. When Branch Motor Express was first going before the ICC to get their certificate, they actually did apply for 1 general commodities and 1 contract carriers, because in the early days, Branch was actually a contract carrier. In the very early days, they were carrying loads of fabric from the mills in Pennsylvania up to New York. New York would cut them, make them into clothes, and then Branch would come take the material, the clothing, back to Pennsylvania to be sold. That kind of thing. So they didn't know which way they wanted to go or which way the ICC would point them to be. Now, eventually, their certificate, MC 10875, was a general commodities certificate. MC 10876, which they had a docket for, was for the contract carrier, which once they were determined they were a general commodities carrier, 10876, that docket was shelved and never reopened. That's the way it was. So the Interstate Commerce Commission would have had to change their tune about, well, you can't be both. You can be one, but you can't be both. So that would have had to change. Another thing to think about if deregulation never happened was that you wouldn't have had all these upstarts. You wouldn't have had the MS carriers, the McLendon trucking, pool freight lines. You wouldn't have had all those contract carriers that emerged after deregulation, or even before deregulation, but they flourished after deregulation. So that would have eliminated a whole lot of additional companies buying all those trucks, and when they went bankrupt, flooded the market with used trucks, whatever. But what about the LTL carriers that were already in existence before deregulation? Well, they were already coming out of an economic slump and the fuel crisis in the 70s. So what would have happened is, if deregulation never happened, a lot of them would still be in business because they would still have their certificates showing on assets which were valuable at the time. And they would still be having their own little territory, the routes that were, controlled by the ICC. So a lot of carriers would still be around today. It's interesting to think of which ones. Now, granted, right after deregulation, a lot of companies did go bye-bye because of the effect of deregulation, taking the valuable certificates off the books, making the companies lose money, the banks holding the loans said, you can't do that, we're going to call the loan. A lot of them shut down. Johnson Motor Lines, they shut down within a month or two of deregulation because they saw the handwriting on the wall. But it's interesting to think of things like this. It's interesting to think of what might have happened if deregulation never occurred. Would Consolidated Freightways still be around? Would McLean still be around? How about Hennis Freight Lines? No, Hennis Freight Lines went out before deregulation. Spectre, PIA, Transcon. A lot of these companies would still be around if it wasn't for deregulation. It's interesting to think about, and that's just my thoughts for the day. I just wanted to bring that up for you. If I think of more, I'll do another video. But there it is. What if deregulation never happened? Now, what are your thoughts about this? What do you think? A lot of you were working for these big trucking companies. A lot of my subscribers were truck drivers, dock workers, whatever. I want to know what you think. What do you see? I mean, take your crystal ball and imagine for a moment what would have happened if deregulation of 1980 never occurred. Would you still be working? Would you still be working for the same outfit? Possibly. I want to hear from you. Let me know in your comments. And spread the word about this channel. I want more subscribers, and you can help me. So if you're not a subscriber, hit the subscription button, like this video, and leave a comment. So I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.